Hello everyone, Bag here, and I am here at 2 AM, the best time to play Star Rail, looking at the new MOC 12. So I've already cleared the first 11 floors, and for floor 12 we are looking at Kafka on the first half, and Aventurine on the second half, so nothing we haven't seen before. The Turbulence buff is a pretty standard one that is based on the frequency of attacks made by allies, so this obviously favors follow-up teams, but it is nice that literally any team can get something out of it, and it's also nice for hunt units like Boothill or soon to be Feixiao, where the AoE hit might help finish off random mobs without having to waste extra turns on them. For our two teams, I'll go into their specific builds after the clear, but the main thing to know is that we have two premium options besides the carries, or three if you count having Guohuo. We have an E1 Boothill, which I would turn off for a showcase like this, but I can't, and I have an S1 Yunli. Besides this, no signature light cones and only 4-star Eidolons, except for Bronya, who is at E1, but I think that's pretty achievable. I spent my 300 standard banner getting her E1 after all, so it's not entirely impossible to expect that. Well anyways, let's waste no more time and get into the run. So, first half, we have a Ron May-less Boothill. We start off with attacking with Harmony MC just because the primary enemies are both imaginary weak. Notably, we don't use Gallagher's technique. I mean, Gallagher is pretty weird here in general with no fire weak enemies, but his SP generation is pretty badly needed with a -1 speed Bronya anyways, so we may as well make use of his break effect buffing. Here we see E1 Boothill at play as he already has a trick shot, so we can immediately get to breaking the main guys, which is important as both have CC that come up pretty fast in their turns, so we want to get them broken and dealt with as fast as possible, even if it means not being at max trick shots for a little while. The only real bit of RNG that's needed in the fight is that the bow enemy does not target Bronya or Boothill. But getting past that, we are making use of Gallagher for his SP generation and besotted state to make sure that we take down the mech as fast as possible. Afterwards, we'll be well positioned for the next cycle. It's also important to note here that keeping Boothill in the stance in between his turns is what allows Bronya to work so well with him, as it makes him spend a lot less SP. So although he eats a lot of turns in this team, he isn't as demanding to keep up with compared to the average carry. Also, as you'll see throughout the fight, we wait to Bronya ult until Boothill's turn is over. This is so that they are aligned when her DDD and her hackerspace activate. Note that Boothill ends his turn by entering his stance, so sometimes you'll see a Boothill be Bronya ulted right before he attacks, but it's deliberate to keep up the synergy either way. Getting back to the fight, we have more than enough turns to get these enemies out by the cycle, so the main focus instead is to have our ults and some SP ready for when we get to Kafka, as we want to get her broken instantly so that we don't have to deal with her CC. The second wave in general is pretty tight, so we have to be very conservative with our resources for this part. As a small thing here, I use a basic into Bronya as a way to fish for her E1 proc while giving her some more energy. Either I go down to 2 SP if I were to just skill instantly, or if I'm lucky I get 3 by doing it this way, so it's worth trying for. We instant delay Kafka with Boothill to avoid her first turn, and here we see the main flaw in my gearing. Without Von Whack, Harmony MC is not faster than my Boothill, so he can't reduce Kafka's toughness before Boothill's turns go through. Ultimately, it doesn't make me lose a cycle or anything, but it does make the turns a lot more strict. The mech is back in this wave, and the fear that they launch a few turns in can ruin some runs, so we'll have to play around that with what we have. For now, the main objective is to burst Kafka down so that we can focus on the mech as fast as we can. The damage is very tight here. This is where the chip damage from stuff like Boothill Super Bacon can really count, as you'll see later on. I tried it in other attempts, and without enough damage from my teammates, Boothill needs to waste another turn taking out Kafka, which just feels absolutely terrible since she's left at like 1% HP. With Dance 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 from Bronya, my Boothill and her reach an effective 160 speed, meaning that across 2 cycles, Boothill can effectively go 8 times since Bronya doubles his turns, which is pretty crazy. Right here is the most important trick of this run. We delay the mech right here so that his fear comes later in the fight. The fear immobilizes your unit at the start of their second turn, if they don't attack him, which Bronya will never do. So instead, we delay him applying that fear so that Bronya never is feared for 2 turns. When you get this late into a fight, if you're not going to be getting another ult, the game becomes less about cycling for your next ult and more about waiting for the perfect opportunity to use it. If I Boothil ulted at any other point, this run is dead every time. Trust me, I've tried. Delaying him right after his turn makes the fear come out later than if I just delayed him at some random time beforehand, since Boothil's delay is based on the enemy's action value, acting like a reverse Dance Dance Dance. So the fear comes out now, but the only unit taking 2 turns left is Boothill, which is fine since he can cleanse the fear by attacking. Another thing notable is how tight the SP ended up being. which shows how important Bronya's E1 and Gallagher ended up being. So we end it in a 2-cycle clear, which is pretty good considering there were 0 fire weak enemies for Gallagher, although the imaginary weaknesses were great for Harmony MC, so I guess it kinda balances out. Going into the second half, we have the forever classic Tingyun Pela core, as well as the Tingyun Ho-Ho synergy, making for a very flexible and comfortable team that generates way more SP than it needs. It does suck a bit that we can't take advantage of these gunman enemies, as they would give Yunli a million counterattacks, but Pela's ult freezing them coupled with the turbulence buff kills them basically no matter what. Tingyun is on Bronya's light cone, which means that everyone can skill here immediately, which helps our rotation start really fast. The only RNG in this first wave is our first counter's hits taking out the gunman for enough energy for a second immediate counter. If I don't get it, I just reset, but I do get it most of the time. An important thing here is to not break the fire enemy, as if he breaks, he reverts back to his single hit attack, but I want him to hit my whole team with his big attack for extra energy. So instead of breaking him, I pile onto the Silvermane guard, who is useless since his next attack just summons soldiers and is nothing that I can counter. Ho-Ho is what allows for the 0 cycle clear of this wave, as without her I would not get this extra counter. And as you can see, thanks to the AoE hit, Pela gets her ult 1 turn early. Thanks, Fire Guy. Now with Aventurine, we immediately ult with Pela to make use of the Eagle set that she has equipped, but with everyone else, we set up with our buffs and debuffs. Now is when it's pretty clear that we are pretty fine on SP, which allows for very liberal usage of Pela and Tingyun skills, while Ho-Ho can keep her heal up at all times. Another thing that's nice is that because Yunli gets extra energy from being hit, the energy draining hit from Aventurine basically just breaks even for her. Of course, with this fight, we have to deal with the RNG with the dices, but at least Yunli has a high chance to be targeted for the minigame. I found out that despite taunting Aventurine in this turn, he can still choose anyone else, as one time he picked Huo instead of Yunli for me. The best thing about this fight for her is that because this minigame gives you full energy if you win, Yunli instantly gets 2 entire counters, which is huge for her. Here, I choose to break with Tingyun instead of Pela as freezing him would delay him more, and we are reliant on his turns to do our damage. Here is probably the weirdest tech I did in this fight. So even though we have full energy with Yunli, we aren't going to use her big counter until Aventurine's second hit. Basically, 1 small counter and 1 big counter is enough for me to bring him into the second phase. So by doing it like this, we are able to bring a counter into the second phase, instead of just dumping everything on him here and overkilling him. This little tech saves an entire cycle. From here on, the clear is pretty standard. It definitely feels like this MOC is more catered to Yunli as opposed to the last one, as enemies take a lot more turns per cycle, while in the last one, for example, the past, present, future enemies either didn't proc Yunli's counter, or they only went like once a cycle, which made low cycle clearing basically impossible. Here, even though we end up breaking Aventurine, he still goes twice in 1 cycle, which is the only reason we are able to clear this fast. One thing notable with Yunli is that her energy is consumed right when she stances up for her counter, meaning that for Ho-Ho or Tingyun, you can funnel your energy without overcapping her by waiting until right after she stances. This also means that she can counter with the attack buffs that Tingyun and Ho-Ho both give. Eyeballing how much energy Yunli needs takes a bit of practice if you don't want to just pause and check her energy after every turn, which could be a gigantic pain, so it does take some getting used to. Obviously also, having Tingyun E6 helps a ton with how many ults we get from Tingyun over the course of this entire fight, as you've been able to see. Aventurine's second attack here, I'm pretty sure, would be just initiating the team-wide dice game, so this really was Yunli's last attack to make before losing an entire cycle. But either way, that's a 2-cycle clear, leaving for a 26-cycle clear in total. So even though I had some premium options, there is obviously a boatload of wiggle room. And it's likely that with smart investments, a free-to-play account can have higher invested teams than what I have here, like for example by getting Robin in her banner coming up very soon. So looking at the builds, I'd say my Boothill is pretty heavily invested into, standard set for him, and we can take a look at the substats. I've gotten pretty lucky on a good amount of his pieces, but it's not entirely perfect, which is kind of what I'm aiming for. Harmony MC is on Watchmaker and Von Wack to get his buff up really fast at the start of the fight, and he is on S5 Memories of the Past, which helps a lot with his energy and break effect. Bronya is running the 1 speed lower than Boothill build with DDD S4, which can help her and Boothill get to an effective 160 speed based on how much she can ult during a cycle, alongside wearing Hackerspace. And Gallagher is on the standard set, Ho is running Quid Pro Quo, so he's just on his free light cone instead to help his super break damage a bit. For the other team, my Yunli is a bit eh. Some pieces are good, but I've had terrible luck for her helmet. Everything else though is pretty standard. Again, she's on S1, but replacing Ho for Lynx and running a free alternative shouldn't be too bad with how many AoE attacks Aventurine has. I just wanted to show off what a low investment clear would look like with a signature, so that if you don't have a signature, you can compare the utility and damage, but I don't think the difference would be more than 1 or 2 cycles. Tingyun is incredibly fast to get her ult off as much as possible. She's also on Bronya's light cone just for the ER and skill points. Pela is also incredibly fast on the Eagle set, obviously running Pearls. And lastly, Ho is on Quid Pro Quo, nothing else really special with her build. Alright, that's it. Let me know if you'd like to see more of this kind of content, or if you have any suggestions on how to tweak the format. Subscribe for more and check my other vids. Bye!